Two guys in the dark.
My ex had a stalker for 2 years. 1 year before I met her, and during the first year that we had dated. He would never do anything drastic. A few phone calls here and there with no speaking. Following her, making her feel uncomfortable. Whenever we called the police, they said that there was really nothing that they could do due to the lack of the evidence. Really, the final straw was when he kicked in the door while we were home. The alarm system had scared him off, but we called the police as usual. They said that they would look into it. I felt that they were taking too long with the whole situation. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I know this is extremely dangerous now that I'm looking back at it, but I was a wild dude. Anyways, we had devised a plan. My girlfriend would leave the house alone. She would tell me if he was tailing her. If he was, I would tail him. Well, he was. The fact that he wasn't in jail infuriated me. I lost it. Took matters into my own hands. While my ex had went to the local pharmacy, he parked and waited for her. In a fit of rage, I walked up to his car. I opened up his door. I beat the living shit out of him. I feel I went overboard because I'm a pretty big dude, and once he was on the ground, I stomped his jaw, which in turn unhinged it. I told him that if he continued, I would eventually kill him. He never returned. The guy who was stalking her was, get this, a guy who had a crush on her in high school. It wasn't an ex, not a lover, not a deranged freak. I still have nightmares about the door incident to this very day, though. I'm just glad that I got him to stop stalking her. Yeah, I could have gone another way and could have done things a lot differently, but I don't have any remorse.
I was in middle school, 8th grade, when formspring.me became popular. It's just one of those anonymous question-asking websites for those who don't know about it. Anyways, I had one of those, and one day, I think it was Monday specifically, I started getting these creepy submissions saying stuff like, I watch you going down the fucking street after school all the time. You're so beautiful. I want to rape you so badly. Stuff like that. But at this point, it's kind of just weirded me out. I didn't think too much about it, since it was likely a friend of mine just screwing with me. So I took down my Formspring site and went about my day. The next day, I started receiving really creepy emails from someone that I didn't know. They started to get really creepy, mentioning my teachers' names, asking me to meet them at the park so that they could rape me, counting down the days that I would die, which was Friday, and describing in detail about how he would rape me, then kill me, kill everyone else that was with me. So I started getting really freaked out, blocked the emails. But whoever this was realized this, and started making new emails to send to me every day. Every day he would count down the days until Friday, until my supposed death. I really didn't want to tell my parents about this, since I still thought that it was maybe a joke. But I ended up breaking on that Wednesday after my school administration did nothing about it. They kept me in from school on Thursday, and on Friday. They even called the police. The police eventually found out it was just some random quiet kid in my math class, who I've never even talked to, nor had mutual friends with. This was probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, just because the emails were so descriptive, and because the kid was just some random guy that I didn't know at all. I was so young, and all of my friends never took it seriously. I really couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat, and I was always shivering, from fear, I guess. Thinking about it makes me really uncomfortable.
This was during my freshman year of college. It was one of the funniest years of my life, and one of my fondest memories are from that year. Also, it was one of the scariest and strangest years. I'm 31 years old now. This story takes place over the entire school year. It was August of 2000, and like most freshmen, I happened to live in the dorms at a state party school. I had opted out of the good school that I got into. I believe it was because I had a little steam to blow off after graduating from a military and college prep boarding school. Plus, after a sports injury, I didn't have any specific plan for life. It went right past Saturday night, if you know what I mean. A buddy from military school, Bill, had gone to the same college. He lived a few floors below me in the same exact dorm. So, of course, we were getting the party started before my parents exhausted the fumes and left the parking lot. For the most part, the first month or so of college was much like that. It was just normal. I had gone to most of my classes, partied almost every single night. I even chased girls around. That was enough for the time being. Things began to change one night, sometime in September. College was not normal again afterwards. My dorm phone decided to ring in the middle of the night. Hello? On the other end, I can only describe the voice as the kind you would picture when you think about a computer talking. Like a car GPS, the early models of it. Hello, Gary. How are you? Not fully awake. I was confused. Who the hell is this? It repeats the same thing. It becomes clear that I'm being fucked with. I hang up. I chuckle. Screw you, Bill. Nice one. I passed out. I forgot about the call for a few days. I didn't mention it to Bill or anybody that I knew. A week later, I get yet another call. It was around the same time of night. This time it says, I'm watching you. Nice. Very cliche. Seriously, Bill. Aren't you knee-deep in Everclear? Or maybe a Tri-Delt at this hour? Enough already. My roommate is going to start getting pissed. I hung up. I confronted him at breakfast the very next morning, not trying to bite too hard to give him a payoff that might incentivize continued calls. I wasn't 100% sure that it was him, and not another one of my stupid friends. He gives a confused response. Whatever. A few days go by. After the second call, I come home. I see multiple messages on the answering machine. I barely knew that thing even worked. It's the computer voice guy again. The machine cuts off after the first few seconds of some of the messages. That tells me that it's just a bot. Then suddenly, hi, I'm watching you. A couple of messages later, where might you be on a Tuesday night? Okay, one of my friends is clearly an asshole, bored enough to really push for a reaction. The next day I play the messages for my roommate, who was around during the calls, which happened to be earlier in the night when he was still awake. He was a close buddy since we were in junior high. Sort of took separate paths after high school. Anyways, he's aware that I'm a wild child. Didn't think anything of the first few messages. After the third or fourth, he gets really spooked. I walk down to a few other buddies' rooms. Casually. But I didn't bring up the subject immediately. They didn't know anything about it either. Over the next few days, I press all close and semi-close friends. But I didn't get any answers, and there were no suspects at all. The calls start coming in even more over the next couple of months. Starting at once or twice a week, then it was every 2 or 3 days. Then it ended up being every day by Christmas break. I don't say anything to my family, although I really should have. It started out as a decent beginning of college. It turned into not showing up for any of my classes, my tests, or anything. My grades started falling. It was an uneventful break. Went back to school, determined to become a new man. I have to get my shit together with these grades. I was getting a .67 GPA. So I tell Bill that I'm going to chill out. I'm have to focus on school. The first night back, I get my first spring semester call. It was from the computer guy. How is your family in Cyprus? That happens to be my hometown. Okay, now this is fucking BS. What kind of douche-lords am I hanging out with that even have this kind of discipline to drag out a prank this long? I get the answer to that question just a few days later, and the answer happens to be nobody that I know. Calls become threatening. They even become dark. I'm very interested, the voice had told me one day. Gary, in being close to you. Yeah, with that kind of sentence structure. I can bring tools. It's going to be all over soon. One day I happened to bring Bill and all of my buddies up to hear the messages. I didn't delete a single one of them for some reason. I guess things happen over longer periods of time. You really don't feel the impact until laying out the complete package. The guys happened to be in shock. I should mention that some of these calls were really specific in making sure to quote specific details about my parents and where they lived, as well as the violence that they were planning on doing to me, like cut open my esophagus with a butter knife, all sorts of crap. It sort of blurred together through hundreds upon hundreds of calls that I got over my school year. A girlfriend of mine that I really liked in high school. She goes to a different school, hundreds of miles away. We reconnected. Thanks to AIM. We talk over time, and eventually we talk on the phone. The computer had mentioned a couple of times, your friend, and then made threats about this unspecified person. But your friend turned into your friend, Layla. Her and I are the only two people ever named in these calls, but it did get me wondering if this was a new lead to the source. She happens to be clueless when I call her about it. That's just great. So one night, we're all partying. We happened to drink at some hotel. A buddy of mine had a big truck. We would go anywhere and everywhere in it. But he'd pass out drunk at the hotel that we stayed at after pounding an entire bottle of whatever the hell he was drinking. I'm not really drinking tonight. I wanted to get back to my own bed. I snatch up the keys to drive back to campus, thinking that I will drive back in the morning to get everybody else. This was one of the few times that I ever drove that year. I wasn't exactly on par with my directions. I make early turns. I'm somehow down a road that I haven't ever seen. I realized this quick, but I figured that I got the general direction of campus pegged. So I just continued the wrong road until hitting the familiar highway that I had known. I found myself in open fields, still a paved road. Aside from the road, there was nothing. It was completely black. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning. This is really strange. There was a four-way stop that I come upon. Strange because I'm probably the fourth person in a year to drive on that exact road. Anyways, I move along. Eventually I get to the familiar highway, and then I'm home free. A few days later, the computer call ends up interrupting his usual depraved threatening to mention that specific four-way stop, the day and the time that I was on it. Which, like I said, it was around 4 o'clock in the morning. There wasn't a single soul in sight. I now realize that the computer voice is obviously tracking my movements. I later joined the military, worked in intelligence, and worked special operations, tracked bad guys all around the world. To this day, I still can't figure out how this dude even knew that I was in the middle of those fields on that exact date, in the middle of the night. I never mentioned it to anybody that I knew. Around March, the apparent rendezvous became the computer voice's focal point. He'd even make sure to let me know the day was really close by. The calls were coming in no fewer than 10 or 15 every single day. The ringer was now off, out of courtesy of my roommate. I turned down the volume of the answering machine as the phone calls recorded. I finally get the message that I'd been waiting for. Keep in mind, I'm now somewhat famous at this university because of this computer guy. People were constantly knocking on my door. They wanted to hear all of the messages. Friend of a friend, or whatever that I knew. It was all people wanted to hear about at parties. For a second, it was really cool, because I'm sure that I ended up getting a few dates from introductions, especially through interest in the guy with the stalker. Now the day, time, location were all set. We will meet in front of Coleman Hall at the middle of Wednesday on April 27th. We will take our friendship to the very next level. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, throughout the year, I had considered the possibility that I was dealing with a female. You know what they say, hell have no fury like a woman scorned. I was that kind of dude when I was 18 or 19 years old. The kind that would attract clinginess and anger. But I ruled out female for various reasons that only a fellow ENFJ would understand. I can build profiles with a high ratio of accuracy, just for available information. This creep didn't feel like a female to me. It didn't even feel like somebody that I knew. I was convinced that I was dealing with somebody who was in their mid-30s, possibly a white computer male nerd, that I had come into contact with at some point. Doesn't matter, because what I ended up finding out on that exact day, I was very wrong. Everybody wanted to be part of this juicy story. There's a ridiculous amount of testosterone floating around the dorm on game day. This was a real creepster. A real horror story that was unfolding before their very eyes. These guys are ready to defend me with their life. Just ask them all. So while they were getting their hopes up on a Mountain Dew, I stay home that very afternoon wondering what the hell I was doing and what I was going to do at midnight. Of course I happened to go. I knew I was going to go. But dude, I've always been an athlete in good shape. Wrestling, football, all of that stuff. I'm still a 19-year-old guy. Good parents. I grew up in the middle upper class. Had a really good life. In other words, I can hold my own in a street fight. But this doesn't feel anything like a street fight, or any kind of fight that I happen to have been in. This is disturbed, violent, angry, and probably a grown-ass psychopath that has decided to dedicate an entire year now of his life to targeting and terrorizing me. So I'm a little freaking nervous at this point. Everybody steadily built up throughout the afternoon and evening. Probably close to 70 or 80 guys had grouped up at the dorm's common area, smoking cigarettes and talking about beating the shit out of people, getting fucked up, and all other kind of cliche things that you can imagine. Party hour happens to approach. Half of the guys end up splintering off into different propositions that probably included more traditional fun, such as beer bongs and sorority girls. I'm left with about 15 to 20 guys. I decided earlier that I'm not going to allow these knuckleheads to shadow me. I could definitely use them just in case of emergency. You know, you never know what could happen. I don't want to risk him spooking out of the meeting. I let them know that they will need to stay inside the doors of the common area so that I can walk out to the meeting spot. The hall, which was adjacent to our connected girls' dorm, there was about 300 paces outside, door to door, to get just so you can get to the hall. The hour had came. I left the crew to begin the longest couple hundred or so paces of my entire life. The boys can see me through the glass door. Couldn't really be able to see much once I got into the hall door. About 100 paces into my spot, I observed two things at the same time. Some kind of small movement in front of the patio walkway. It happens to go all the way around the building. The movement was in a spot along the walkway where the only normal bulb is out. I'm not exactly sure how I was able to see him. I realize someone happens to be crouched behind one of the cookie-cutter bushes outside of the patio perimeter against one of the buildings, in dark clothes and a hoodie. He's a few feet from the path where I'm supposed to meet him, positioned to where I should not be able to see him, given the pillar that was blocking the shadow, plus the burnt-out light. I could have walked to the door, and I could have never even noticed someone was down there. I jump mid-step. I see him raise up just a little, thinking that I might have seen him. I see him raise up and take a step right towards me. A fight or flight hits. I've learned that my fight or flight chooses fight in more mild situations, flight during the intense ones. But for the shit-your-pants situations, it's scarier to run away with your back to whatever scary that I'm dealing with. So I fight. Before I realize exactly what I'm doing, I'm in a dead sprint towards this dude, who I'm guessing sees what I can't yet, which happens to be my platoon of guys busting through the glass doors in hot pursuit. The creepster gets the fuck out of there, running on the patio, alongside the hall, towards the parking lot. I can tell that this isn't a 30-year-old computer nerd that I predicted. The creepster is above average height. He's pretty much average broad, built athletically. That's all that I could really tell. I wasn't even sure if he was white. He was kind of tan. If not Hispanic, maybe Middle Eastern. I'm really booking it, right as he turns on a dime at the edge of the building. I realize I'm moving fast enough just to catch him. Everybody else is really far behind me. I realize that I'm moving so fast, I won't be protected as I turn hard right to the corner of the building. If he happens to stop there, I'm toast. I turn the corner. I see the van sitting alone in the parking lot right in front of me. It's running, and the brake lights flicker on and off. Park into drive, and begin inching forward towards the exit. The dude is, of course, heading for the van, which for some reason sent this whole new level of fear into my body. This is it. This is actually happening, and I'm going to get murdered tonight. I can't stop, though. Something just keeps me moving. I guess I'd come this far. I dealt with this crazy bullshit for almost an entire year now, unable to do anything other than just try to ignore it. I'm not going anywhere academically, and my life doesn't quite have all that much purpose to it just yet. If I'm going to get killed, I'll at least know, and this crap will at least be over with. Plus, I still have a chance to catch him before he even gets away. If I could get close enough to dive tackle him, I could still be on my own to deal with the creeper, his driver, and now I realize there happens to be a third person that was manning and sliding the side door. I really don't care how badass you think you are when you're a 19-year-old dude. The chances of taking down 3 grown men that are already violent criminals and prepared to victimize are about 1 and not gonna even happen. My turn happens to be slow and wide because of the full-on sprint. I lose my ground. I'm about 20 yards from the lot when he goes to flying leap onto the side of the van. There couldn't have been any rows of seats for a leap like that. Creepster number 3 happens to slam the sliding door shut as the van peels out of the parking lot. Hits a right, and then it's gone in an instant. The relief of not being kidnapped, bound, and gagged with 3 psychopaths, who most likely had some pretty horrific plans for me, is now just as strong as the dread of the fact that this is not over with. I happen to be speechless. My platoon, as they caught up a minute later, was exactly the same way. A few of them had caught up enough to witness the parking lot stuff, but no one was talking about it. The testosterone was now being replaced with genuine and earnest concern. They all had just stood there, catching their breath, making sure that I was all right. One guy happens to ask if anybody got the plate number. Not even I got it. Not enough light to really see. We start walking back. I happen to be reliving the scene as we happen to retrace our steps. We got closer to the meeting spot. I see something that scares me more than anything else. On the other side of the pillar, where the person was crouching, there's a video camera sitting on a stand that was pointing right at the spot that I would have been standing at when I should have not have been able to notice him. And it happens to still be recording. My first serious boyfriend had stalked me for 5 years after I broke up with him. The reason I broke up with him is because I noticed him becoming increasingly possessive and controlling with me. This worried me, and I was really young. He was older than me, so I decided that I should get out. The breakup itself was very brutal. He cried and screamed. He even begged. Initially after the breakup, his behavior seemed like the harmless actions of a bitter ex. Constant texting and phone calls, sending gifts to my workplace, that kind of stuff. After about 6 months, when this hadn't died down, I bumped into him on my way home from work, or if I was out shopping, so I just ended up moving. I couldn't leave my job immediately, but moving houses didn't make a difference anyways. This behavior had continued for a few years. His behavior became increasingly worse. I don't want to go into any details, and the police were reluctant to do anything about it. I moved every 6 to 9 months. I changed jobs twice. Somehow he managed to track me down every time. I didn't use social media. I insisted on friends of mine not take any kind of pictures of me, just in case they posted them on social media. I kept my phone number within my circle of friends. He always managed to get my new number. I ended up a paranoid wreck, thinking that one of my friends had betrayed me, or that my phone company had me listed in a phone book, or all other kinds of crazy thoughts. Then another year had passed, and as our encounters got worse, I reported him to the police once again. This time, they took some action. At this stage, I couldn't even sleep or eat. I couldn't concentrate at work. I was just a shell. 2 months after I reported him to the police, I woke up one morning to a story in the newspaper about staff in the National Tax Office using resources improperly. My ex was the main perpetrator, using his job to access all of my information. In this job, he had access to my tax records, which meant every time that I changed jobs, address, or even my phone number, he had access to the most up-to-date information on me. Before the court case began, he committed suicide. I'm not ashamed to say that I cried with relief. They were the worst years of my adult life. I dated a girl in high school. We had lost our virginity to each other. Once we started having sex, She started getting very possessive of me. She tried to ban me from hanging out with any of my friends, wanted me to spend all of my free time with her. After a few months of this, I broke it up with her. That's when crazy really started. She started showing up at my house, just standing outside, then showing up everywhere that I went. Then had her mother call me, tell me that we were supposed to get married because we had sex. Then she scratched at my car, threatened to kill herself if we didn't get back together. It'd gotten so bad, my mother had called the police a few times. I tried to get a restraining order on her. Anyways, after a year of this, I gave up. We got married and now have 2 kids. I'm joking. It finally ended when she tried to attack me in a mall parking lot. I knocked her the fuck out defending myself. Apparently her mother told her that I was no good because a man should never hit a woman. Just some word of advice. It may be fun, but please don't ever have sex with crazy people.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.